Welcome to episode 2 of Innovid's Navigating the Now consumer video series, where we uncover how brands, agencies, and publishers are adapting to the ever-changing trends we've seen this year. 2020 has taught us to plan for the unpredictable and listen to the signals. Ultimately, speed and agility are critical in moving forward. In this episode, I got the chance to sit down with Ron Amram, Senior Director of Global Media at Mars Inc., and Crystal Eastman, Head of Global Marketing at The Trade Desk. I asked them for their perspectives on the do's and don'ts for performance marketing in today's landscape, and what mindset shifts marketers need to make in order to keep up with the now consumer. Let's watch. So Ron, hello, and thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. Now, Ron, you've been in the advertising industry for over 20 years and have witnessed your fair share of change in the marketplace.
Yeah.
But 2020 is unique in that so much has changed in such a short period of time. What are some of the major shifts you've seen this year that have caused you to adapt your traditional approach to marketing?
I think, there's like so many things in there, right? So you've seen a dramatic change in consumer behavior, right? So how, even retail purchasing has changed dramatically. Pack sizes have changed dramatically. So just the way consumers approach and the route to market for brands is quite different. Media consumption, as in the COVID world, has drastically changed as well. As more people are home, there's more home consumption of media. There's less, there's been a dramatic shift away from commuting, so less outdoor, and mobile consumption has shifted to in-home as well. Streaming has radically increased, so OTT impact and has dramatically accelerated in this area as well, as smart television viewing, right? So all of these things are dramatic changes, and so the media. So you have both the product changes in terms of route to market and retail and distribution. You have media consumption changes as well, and then obviously, we're in a massive recession, a global recession, and this has happened before. We have a bit more history in this. It's not a pandemic. That we're talking about in this case. It's a financial thing. So so media budgets are completely strapped, and I think we're all struggling not to cut muscle and make sure that we're making the right optimization decisions as well. So media investment is challenged, is almost for many companies, for most companies, and it's quite a challenge right now to make sure that how do you, when we eventually come through this, and we will come through it, that how do we position our brands to accelerate and grow, and potentially disproportionately relative to our competition, right? So all of these things, some of these things we've seen before. Others, to your point, were in uncharted waters in terms of, the level of change this year, in terms of how the consumer has had to adjust to brand selection, where they buy, how they buy. And then the media that they consume and how they interact with our ads, with brands. So it's quite a challenging time.
Absolutely. And I would say, 2020, if nothing, has taught us the importance of planning for the unpredictable, to your point. And what we're seeing and hearing is that the need for flexibility has become a new norm. So how have you introduced more flexibility into your strategies? Can you give us an example of what's worked and perhaps what hasn't?
Yeah, I think the need for flexibility, I'll say, is differently. And I think as a marketer, you need to be nimble, and the way to do that is to listen more. So connect with signals that matter and signals that provide you quick feedback. I think in a world where we've lost, marketers sometimes have lost sight of the ultimate KPI, which is our impact on sales. Well, how do you do that? How do you find more rapid signals, more granular signals that allow you to listen, change, adopt, and optimize in real time? That is the real challenge in today's digital world, that there's so much new. The media buys are, digital media is much less forgiving in that it's very specific, right? It doesn't, you're not getting millions of impressions on top of the ones that your target audience, so that it's forgiving, right? So digital is very precise. So if you're wrong in digital, you're precisely wrong. So you have to be very receptive to understanding what's working and what's not working, and iterating, changing, and optimizing. This, in a world of where businesses are strained, it's even more critical, right? So to your point, the danger right now is that you're not paying attention. You have to be listening. You have to measure. You have to find faster measures that are correlated to the bigger, more important business objective measures, so that you can make changes more quickly. And then you have to optimize ruthlessly. And that's the truth is, you have to find a path forward. And this is where, I've said this to my teams and, the people we work with. This is a moment when marketing can have a disproportionate impact, right? When things get dark, marketing can be a game changer. It's a multiplying effect, right? When you have great creative, when your campaign breaks through, that's not a 2% change. That's a 3. That can have it's a double-digit huge increase, and it's a game changer for brands. It's hard to do, but if we can do it now, it's very, very impactful.
I know you talked about this need for nimbleness and to optimize in real time. How does this growing need for greater agility or nimbleness in your marketing translate into new or different expectations for your media partners?
That's a very, very good one, because in a world of kind of quote unquote walled gardens, where you have data privacy issues, we have to find more ways, and we have to keep pushing to experiment, to understand, to get better signals, and to get more of an illustration of what the consumer is thinking and how they're acting and reacting. That requires testing and learning, building new ways to measure and actually probably stack your data and combine it so that you can correlate impact across lots of different touch points and behaviors, right? So I think what we're all looking to do is test new ways of measurement, B, push existing or proven measurement into places that we haven't been able to do it before, and C, combine this kind of in an aggregate view that makes it more holistic and valuable, right? So, and I'm not even just talking about media in this case. It could be, connecting things with distribution and price points and promotion information to make things more holistic, so that we're not just looking at one gauge when we have 5 or 6 things happening at the same time.
You hit on a lot there, data being one of the pieces, and really thinking about addressability and relevance.
Yeah.
Programmatic is something that we have seen steadily increasing over time. More and more advertisers are starting to think about, how do I leverage data to reach my audiences? How do I leverage data to enable more real-time optimization? Can you share just a little bit about how you're specifically thinking about applying data-driven approaches to buying and creativity to improve your overall advertising performance?
So, from what we have learned, how you approach programmatic or automated buying, we'll call it, on a broad sense, is the key to potentially unlocking success or failure from a buying perspective. There's creative, obviously, and there's audience segmentation work, and lots of different things that impact marketing, media, and digital. But programmatic is a significantly different behavior than say in the traditional world, or how we've done things in the past. And it is complex, and there are many different layers to it. And many marketers and media people don't dive into that level of detail and really own it. You can really steer campaigns to success by understanding, unlocking, and applying technology, data, and information at that point of contact, at the buying stage. And that's where you can really learn the right, what is the low-hanging fruit consumer-wise, audience segment-wise? what is the right contextually relevant experience for our assets? And do we have the right assets for the right context? What are the KPIs that drive success? What are the key triggers in terms of making media more effective than it was before? And that's that point of contact where you really could start taking granular theoretical, making theories and applying them and impacting in your programmatic world, right? So that's where I think you're getting to a key point where where DSPs or where it's social media, whichever you want to approach it, the more you understand and define the right path forward through your programmatic buying, the more effective you can be. And this gets to this real-time optimization notion that you can affect your campaigns in real time. And that's a big difference than the way marketing was. And you talk about how old I am and how long I've been in the kit. That's the big difference between marketing before and media before and media now, right? You can make an impact today on your buys for tomorrow, and you have to. That's the difference between success or failure. And that happens in the programmatic stage.
I think measurement's an area where we've seen a massive amount of investment and improvement over time. And you can't really talk about performance without talking measurement, right? So how are you approaching measurement these days? Does it vary by channel? And is there such a thing as true omni-channel measurement?
There is such a thing. I don't think we've cracked it completely. I mean, I think most CPG, FMCG companies still talk about market mix model, and I think we need to get to more tactical correlated measures that drive business growth. And that's what we're all working on right now. Whether there's an omni-channel approach to that, or you have to break it down on a channel basis and ladder it up, you have to start with what you have. So I think what you're seeing is, for most of us, is we start with a channel approach, whether it's closed loop studies or whether it's proxy KPIs that ladder into success. And that's I think the truth is this is still, as much as there's a tremendous amount of energy and investment going on in the space, I don't think it's been cracked yet. And there are still many barriers. But I think we're all seeing progress and getting energized by are we finding new KPIs, whether it's attention metrics? Are we creating a holistic view where we can start making cross-channel optimization decisions? Those are, only happen when you put energy behind it and start experimenting. So you could start building correlations and A/B testing and things of that nature that builds a holistic learning over time, right? So I think there's a lot of pressure testing going on at the moment. So we're not there all the way yet, but I think to answer your question, I think there's been, in the past few years, there's been significant progress in the industry.
One of the trends you hit on up front was the rise in streaming and OTT. The hypergrowth of the streaming channel is something that we've covered at length at Innovid. And when we think about the potentially permanent shifts in consumer behaviors around streaming and cord cutting, how are brands thinking about evolving their go-to-market strategies? And how are you thinking about TV within your overall marketing mix these days?
Yeah, I mean, look, TV is still important, and TV plays a role, but we're not speaking about, I think the key thing is you have to stop thinking TV first. If video is important, then video, but there's lots of routes to getting video content in front of consumers in a contextually relevant way, right? So this is, I think, a behavior change and a language change for marketers, but we have to be screen neutral in this approach. And I think driven by the consumer's change in behavior. If they don't want to pay for a cable box, then they're not going to pay for a cable box. And we can't assume that that's how they're consuming video anymore. And the ratings detail here has been, well documented and described. So let's not go chasing, unicorns here, and just let's focus on really listening to what consumers do and reacting to it. So I think a video screen neutral planning approach is exactly the direction we're all going in. And can we get an understanding of what the different quality differences are between screen types and where the content is consumed? So that is a real distinct difference. Not all screens are the same. There are benefits and issues with each of them, and you have to understand it and apply it and make sure you're customizing your creative and your media buying and your pricing accordingly. But all of that's, in my view, should already be done. I think the issue here is some brand people still want to do 30-second creative and make sure it goes everywhere. But there's a place and time where you can do long form video, and I'll call 30 seconds long form, but you can't, that's not going to fly everywhere. Right. So, but to your point on OTT, I think it's a video platform, it's a screen, and it's here to stay. It's not going away.
Now, your purview is global, and you've operated on a global capacity for years now. As we think about the trends and the changes that have taken place, are there any variances in terms of what you're seeing in the U.S. versus other regions or markets? How should global brands think differently across the world?
Yeah, I think you have to, the way we view the world is that there are differences on a market level, or even a regional level. And there are certain markets that are leading indicators, but historically, and this is, these leading indicators have global implications over the long term. The U.S. and China tend to be leading. First off, these are huge media markets, huge populations, and massive innovation happening in these two countries. If you're following those two markets, whether it's consumer innovation, media consumption innovation, media platform innovation, those two markets tend to drive significant behavior shifts across the rest of the world. OTT been a big phenomenon here in the United States. It happened maybe here first, let's say, at scale. Well, it's in many of our countries now, it's a part of our media planning, right? So, you could say that it's, whether it's about packaged goods, grocery store behavior, things happen in certain markets, and if consumers like it, it will flow and it will travel and it will cross borders, and we see that with media behavior as well. So. I think what we're looking from here is what new insights can we see locally that we can take and apply it globally, so that we're not surprised, and so that we're educating our people and our media people and our marketing people globally. And trends and changes to consumer behavior are things that we need to be aware of.
Now, as we look towards the future, the question we're always asking ourselves is, where do we go from here? So from your perspective, what are new best practices or skills and tools that are necessary for success moving forward?
I think, the key thing that we're stressing right now is innovation, experimentation, rapid agility. And that's not necessarily, a COVID type, post-COVID principle. It's really the new, the consumer is changing, and the change is continuous, right? So, whether it's, cord cutting, or whether it's cord nevers, or whether it's TikTok, or whether the reality is that new things keep presenting themselves, and the consumer is adjusting. Innovation is something that's constant, and we have to be aware and able to thrive in a world of constant change. That's the behavior that is trying. So it's not about catching up anymore. It's about being able to sprint along with the changing consumer. And that's the new way of working. You have to be able to listen and adjust.
I love that. Innovation is constant, and I think that we're going to continue to innovate. So we're up for a period of constant change now and in the future. Ron, it's always a pleasure. We so much appreciate your perspective and your guidance. Thank you again for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye. What a great conversation. I always love talking to Ron because he truly paints a picture of what global brands are facing and how advertisers should be looking ahead while dropping some quotable gems along the way. Next, I caught up with Crystal Eastman from the Trade Desk to get a very different point of view on trends, markets, and best practices. Let's take a look at what Crystal had to say. Crystal, hello, and thanks so much for joining us today.
Oh, the pleasure is mine, Stephanie. Thank you for having me. Fun fact, I both interviewed for and onboarded to this great new job at the trade desk in the middle of this pandemic. So I know it seems so tough, if you're a marketer watching this and you're out of work or you're really struggling to get momentum with growth in your job today, it is possible to get back to growth. And it's going to be us, the marketing community, who gets the whole world back to growth together. So I just want to make sure you guys know it is possible. I'm proof, and we're going to get there together.
Yeah, well, we're so excited to get your take on what's been happening in the marketplace as of late and how that's impacted the marketer mindset when it comes to reaching and connecting with consumers. So change is the name of the game these days, and let's start there. What are the major moves that have impacted your strategy and how you're currently supporting marketers at the trade desk?
So as far as, how the pandemic has impacted our focus, I don't want to say I'm happy that the pandemic happened, but many of us are having an I told you so moment right now. All performance marketers did not need the pandemic to show us that 60-second television commercials were not the most effective way to engage our audience. I can remember at least 5 years ago observing in my own digital campaigns that things that were 6 seconds or less were way outperforming everything else I was doing. So, frankly, I didn't need linear TV buying to blow up, in order for me to really start, getting smart there. So I think for many marketers, they were ready for this, and now it's land grab time. For others, it's an extreme wake-up call. The pandemic didn't cause these shifts in consumer behavior, everybody going more to their device, being constantly connected all day long, but it did accelerate it in a way that you can't ignore it anymore.
Yeah, now the rise of streaming, to your point, is not a new conversation, but the pace and acceleration of change in such a short period of time is new. In your recent report, The Time Is Now for Connected TV, you touched on the massive impact CTV has had on your business. Can you share some of the trends you're seeing specifically in the streaming space?
Absolutely. So even before the pandemic, if I were looking at data from last year, I would have seen that consumers were spending 3 to 5 hours a day on their connected device. It was already becoming like their primary lifeblood to content. And we were seeing constant increases in things like podcasts on the way to work, streaming radio, CTV starting to replace linear, connected news, gaming in apps, like you name it. It was already 3 to 5 hours a day. And I know that's hard for all of us to admit that we're doing that, but we see it in the data. So we don't need you to admit it for it to be true. Now it's probably twice that, or worse. And so it's forcing everybody to get on board with this thing that was already happening. One thing that's really great about the Trade Desk platform that our CEO, Jeff Green, is always talking about, when you're buying programmatic, it's very easy to turn things on and off when you need to, when you see something's not working, when you see a new opportunity coming, you can turn things off quickly, reassess, and get back online. You don't have to waste your money through the process. So, at the start of the pandemic, we did see that on our platform. Many of our customers had to pause everything and really reassess and start thinking through these things and start going through one at a time. Huge investments that they were making in linear TV, or just generally upfront commitments towards things that weren't going to happen, anymore, and start building new muscles in their teams for this more data-driven and agile approach to campaign planning, buying, and management. And these are the tools that every marketer needs to be successful today. CTV is really just one, of the many things that's proving out, in this circumstance.
That concept of flexibility and agility has really emerged as a rising need for marketers across verticals. Are you seeing any new tactics or techniques brands are leveraging to create greater flexibility in how they're planning or buying these days?
So, what we're finding is as people shift to these more data-driven techniques, they're starting to realize things that they had accepted in the past as not being possible are actually possible. And anything that's not quite possible is almost possible. So it's really very exciting for brands as they start to embrace these channels. With moving to CTV, depending on the level of change for what the brand is used to, dipping their toe in and here, We found that familiarity is really important as part of the process, and that you can't just change everything and restart from scratch with whole new ways of measuring success and determining ROI. So we're trying to make it as familiar as possible, and we've heard that loud and clear from our customers. So that's why we actually enhanced our CTV product to ensure that Nielsen, ComScore, and IRI data are available, in our platform for measurement, because that was something that was critical to TV buyers that were migrating from linear to CTV. So as long as it's familiar enough that you can continue to build on the strategies that you've already had in place, it also unlocks, incredible opportunities that we have not had before, of being able to be hyper relevant and personalized with exactly who you're trying to reach, with exactly what type of message, and not just once, but the ability to implement true frequency capping across devices to understand that all of our consumers are moving across channel all day long. And they're not only going to one publisher for content or one social provider even, they're using all of it. And these new digital omni-channel planning, buying, and management tools allow you to really address frequency for the first time, and also really understand your whole marketing funnel and what is contributing to your true business results along the way.
Yeah, really, the concept of connecting the dots and thinking about frequency management on a global level is definitely a conversation and an ask and a need that we've heard loud and clear on our end at Innovid here as well. Now, you talked about data-driven marketing, and I think that's such an important part of the value and the benefit of programmatic. When you think about data and marketers' willingness to leverage and tap into data to improve marketing performance, are you seeing any trends, any shifts in terms of how brands are actually applying data, and what types of data are they applying to really move the needle in performance today?
So we're seeing different brands at completely different stages in the maturity curve, and also different verticals starting to take advantage of the performance-driven data differently. So, for example, let's dig into the auto industry. So in the United States, on average, there's approximately 5 million people looking for a car at any given time. But prior to going data-driven, how do I find them? I had to market to 300 million versus via linear TV, and just hope that I'm not annoying them too much, and also bear all of the cost of doing this spray and pray tactics. Now, things are starting to change. So auto is one of the industries that we've been seeing come back online via programmatic buying much faster, and also much more success than some of the other industries. And it's really unlocking a whole new way of growth for them. In the US, we're seeing a rapid, consumer flight from urban areas to suburban areas. So it's actually making the number of people looking for first-time cars much higher, than it usually is during this staging game. And our data partner, Urban Science, is able to directly tie sales at a dealership to digital advertising spend. So we're able to help our clients prove that they are effectively identifying who are these first-time car searchers, focusing exclusively on them, and then measuring actual results from that. So it's really helping the industry improve, the way they approach advertising overall. And it's challenging, the historical mantra of this industry that we're only doing brand because we market lifetime. Eventually it all plays out. Just trust us. We know people are seeing the ads, and eventually it's working, and now it's really becoming real. And I'm sure that this is going to lead to a lot more advertising spend for brands that are able to prove this and make the case to their CEOs and CFOs that this campaign that I'm running is actually bringing my business back to growth. And it's going to be really amazing to see.
Now, the U.S. is often looked to as an early innovation or early mover market. What are you seeing in terms of the adoption of trends or new approaches to buying and optimization across various regions and geographies?
Well, in my role at the trade desk, I oversee all of our regional marketing teams. And it's been just fascinating to get to be in this seat at this time and be able to experience the differences, all day long, with how each country is approaching getting their brands back to growth. Really, at the end of the day, the regulatory environment plays a huge role in, which tactics end up being able to be deployed and how successful different channels are. So, for example, in EMEA, There's actually, 20 or so countries, each with their own regulatory bodies, each with their own rules around privacy and how you can use identity for targeting. That plays a big factor into, how quickly they can adopt something new like CTV. But the UK is really having some fantastic momentum. We've just launched our partnership with Channel 4, and we're going big there with bringing CTV to the audiences. So I'm sure, we all know what happens when CTV comes to town. It only goes up from there, and we're really excited to be watching that happen. It's been fascinating for me to see that Australia is actually quite similar to the US in their adoption curve, and your CTV is going gangbusters. Many strategies that marketers use in the US work in Australia, and vice versa. Things that are deployed in Australia can be successfully reused in the US. So there's tons of synergies there for global marketers to take advantage of. I would say that of all the countries in the world, China is actually leading the globe in CTV. We all know Game of Thrones here in the United States. I'm a huge fan. Right. In China, their version of Game of Thrones, Zhangqi Palace, actually had more than 15 billion viewers, including 530 million in one day. So they're really leading and we're following, and it's really awesome to look to China to be able to see what's coming next.
Amazing. Now, as we think ahead, a lot has changed in a little time. And as our friend Ron from Mars said, innovation is constant. So what do you predict for the next future of advertising? And do you have any advice for marketers looking to adopt new tools or new strategies for success in that next future?
Absolutely. So, as I said before, the pandemic is surprising. Actually, all of the external factors are surprising. Murder hornets, hurricanes, wildfires, crazy politics all over the world. There's a lot that's surprising. But the shifts in consumer behavior are not at all surprising. So I think speed and agility are critical to the way we move forward together. I know all of us have let ourselves off the hook for that and been like, oh, my brand has a lot of process, a lot of governance. I have governance. My brand needs to be safe. I can't take too much risk, and we slow ourselves down. Nobody can afford to be slow anymore. The world is only going to get ever faster, and I hope that this is the time that we learn that. Programmatic buying that allows you to stop and start, that allows your campaigns to follow your customer naturally when they make changes. We're going to see a lot more of that. The channels are expanding, the ways of buying are only going to grow, and I think we're going to see a lot more of programmatic buying being the rule, not the exception. And things like upfront buying and publisher-specific commitments will continue to be there, but for very special cases as the exception, not the rule. Yeah. I also think we've learned that continuous learning is critical. As marketers, we can't be one-trick ponies. There's always something else coming, and you can't be like two heads down on yesterday to not see the future. At the Trade Desk, we're trying to be there for the marketing community with the Edge Academy, which is something that we had in market before the pandemic, but we saw, how the changes in the world were affecting the marketing community. We were losing jobs. We were being asked to do performance marketing in ways we had never been asked to do before under so much pressure. So we actually dropped everything else and released our Edge Academy with a refreshed curriculum, perfect for either somebody who's a first-time digital marketer or somebody who's kind of a pro and is still looking to get better. And we made it free to the entire marketing community to help do what we can for the community and help us all get back on our feet. And the third thing I would say about the future is, guys, we're really busy, like doing all of this stuff with the pandemic, but don't forget, 5G is coming, and it's going to change everything. Just like when people moved from regular phones to smartphones, when we moved from dial-up to broadband connections, there's things that we've been experimenting with and thinking about that don't yet fully work today because there's key frictions in the customer experience. But the second those things get fixed, it's game over. So I really just don't want anybody to lose sight of 5G and the possibilities that it's going to unlock even more for marketing on the personal device. Everything is going to be possible, and we need to be ready for it.
I love that. I love the concept of everything is going to be possible. So once 5G
it's not in a pandemic. It's all
it's game on, right? And I got to say, I think it's so fantastic that you've opened up your Edge Academy. I know we're all craving education and best practices these days. Crystal, I want to thank you again for your time today. The data-driven space is only going to continue to grow, and you've given us a lot to think about as we prepare for that future. So thank you again for joining us and for sharing your view.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. So great to be here. And thank you for all of you for listening.
And we're now live here on Tuesday, September 29th, 2020. You've just seen the premiere of the latest episode of Innovid's Navigating the Now consumer video series, An Old Media Mindset in a New Media World. Again, I'm your host, Stephanie Geno, and I'm thrilled to welcome back our experts, Ron Amram from Mars. Hi, Ron. Welcome back. It's great to see you again.
I'm glad to be back.
And Crystal Eastman from the Trade Desk. Hello, Crystal.
Hey, Stephanie. Great to see you again.
Yeah, thanks for joining us today. Now, as a reminder, we are here to answer your questions live. We've had some come through during the premiere, but it's not too late. There's a QA button at the bottom of your screen, so feel free to ask questions, and we'll be taking those in real time. So let's jump in and hear about some of the burning questions that people had as they were listening to that thoughtful perspective. We're going to start out, Ron, you had talked about innovation being constant and the need to drop fast metrics to better optimize. Do you have any additional examples you can share on what that looks like and what some of those fast metrics that you've embraced are?
Yeah, the one that we're actually experimenting with right now is attention, because I think, one of the key things that, even this is true for traditional media as well, just because an impression is created doesn't mean that the consumer is necessarily paying attention. And their interest for the attention that they pay to an ad is actually quite indicative to how receptive they are to the ad and the contextual relevance that it's being consumed in. So there are several vendors in the space now that are starting to track attention, whether it's even set-top box data for traditional television, but also mobile, how people are holding their device, what they're touching, what they're clicking, how they're leaning or tilting it, are they viewing it vertical or horizontal. Those are pretty good signals as to whether they're engaged in the actual content and how much of the screen it represents, right? So all of that can be measured and tracked. If you could start putting kind of a KPI and a tracking around that relative to one impression versus another, you can potentially see how engaged people are. This is a fairly new idea, and one different from, say, viewability, where it's not just time spent, but really real interest and engagement, right? So that's one that we're currently experimenting with right now.
Amazing. Attention as the new economy. Crystal, anything you want to add in terms of new metrics that you're seeing advertisers embracing?
No, we're right there with Ron. Hi, Ron. So nice to meet
Hello.
you virtually. And I loved what Ron said about attention, because something that we've been spending a lot of time thinking about is CTV versus linear TV. And a discussion that we're constantly having, for newcomers to connected TV is, how come it's more expensive in some ways than linear TV on a CPM basis. And what we're finding is that it's just a more premium touch point. Like what Ron said is exactly right. Like the way that the consumer is captivated when they're in the CTV mindset just makes them so much more valuable, that impression. The ad load is smaller, like the commercials are shorter. So they're much less likely to have the behavior that you have when you're watching live TV, where we've kind of been trained throughout our whole life. The second the commercial comes on, to get up and go refill your chips or go to the bathroom or make a phone call, et cetera, et cetera. And it's not the same, in the CTV experience. I love what Ron said, on that. We're thinking about that a lot too.
Yeah, I'm definitely guilty of that as well. Now, both of you hit on the adoption of, or I should say the death of long form ads in some form or fashion.
Mm-hmm.
What lengths are you seeing move the needle these days? If the 30-second or 60-second spot is dead, what's that sweet spot for brands moving forward?
Why don't you take that one first, Ron? I'm dying to know.
Ron, you're on mute.
Sorry, I'm back. This is something that is still happening even as we're kind of on Zoom calls all day long. I'm still finding myself on mute half the time. All right. The reality is that even, you know, the display ad, right, which, you know, has no time link to it, can still be effective. Short form video, whether it's a kind of 4 to 6 second bumpers, can be incredibly impactful. I think with the way that brand people struggle with this, because they really, the power of long form video is something that can't be denied, right? And the ability to drive just not just awareness, but consideration and purchase intent and all the different layers in here. Video is all inclusive of all of those things. But the reality is for many brands, awareness is a big part of the problem and a big objective of advertising investment. And awareness can be built simply from brand recall, right? So the reality is a great campaign with the right image, with the right few select words, can work almost instantaneously. Again, I'm describing something that's not easy to do, and it's very hard to do, but it happens and it's done, right? So that's, for me, I think the best campaigns are briefed with the intent that they need to be able to communicate almost instantaneously. And then you can build stories beyond and above and beyond that can go to 15 seconds, 30 seconds, or maybe even a full minute, depending on the right place, especially if it's something addressable television where it has, where you can go down, take the blue pill and go down the path. But the reality is that all of these things play a role, even the shortest forms, right? So that's where I think it's important to understand that all of these things also work better together, right? So the reality is I'm perfectly comfortable on, working on with out-of-home units, which have no time real spent to them outside of a few seconds, knowing that should weave in together with a broader, multi-layered experience and journey for consumers.
Yeah, so I totally agree with Ron on that. And I think what's most important, for all marketers to understand and prepare for is not like exactly what might perform the absolute best today, as across all of your experiments, but that the attention span is becoming ever shorter. And if you look to other countries that have been more mobile for longer, like China, they've been off all of the like medium to long form formats that we still use for years already. Even email is too long, for them. They're on WeChat, not email, because who's going to read a 3-paragraph email? And I'm not sure we are either, to be honest with you. And same with things like TikTok, that it's 15 seconds and it's all you need, in most cases for some like really incredible brief storytelling. And things like Quibi that are even challenging like the core format of our content, not our effectiveness of ads, saying, we're not sure that people can even pay attention for 30 minutes anymore, for a television show. And I think if you're looking at, your kids or your kids' babysitters or other countries that have been, mobile longer, you can see the future pretty clearly. So we need to be prepared and we need to be constantly working on how to make that impact instantaneously, just as Ron said.
We need to think in tweets these days. Now, both of you hit on global and specifically the US and China being leading markets in our conversations. When you think about global marketers that are trying to get into the CTV advertising space, would you recommend that they limit their CTV advertising strategies to the US and China initially, or are they free to kind of go global out the gate?
Yeah, I would say global out the gate. My biggest recommendation for, all, advertisers and, brands that are either in the creative capacity or, in the media planning role would be to start with an audience first plan. And if you let the technology do the work, it will help you find your customers on whatever platform that they are. Many countries already have, a tremendous amount of premium inventory available in CTV, so their customers are there. And some countries where it's not yet ready, your technology will tell you that. So you don't have to know everything to create a great plan.
Yeah, for us, it's a bit, it's a bit of both, right? So most of our brands are global, but our business is still very local, right? And our media plans are very local. The size of our business and the scale and ambition of each of our brands is defined locally. So the truth is it's a bit of both. I think one can help and infuse the other, right? So our global vision and strategy is built up from a local level. So the truth is it's a bit, it's layered, right? So it's not like you can go just approach one versus the other. But the truth is our brands, I think that to Crystal's point, are very global, right? And we're looking at, we have literally, I think 12 brands that are $1 billion more in sale on a global footprint. So we have many big global brands, but I think there's local nuance, there's local understanding and audience, even how our products are distributed locally are different, right, and consumed differently. If you go back to my previous life in beer, that's absolutely very true. Whether people are drinking in bars and pubs or people who are drinking at home, that's different culturally in each country, right? So it's so the reality is, if you're doing things well, you're accounting for local differences, but that's not always the case. And many things are not the same. That's one of the beauties of the world that we live in, is the different local nuance and cultural differences. And I think media needs to account for that, right? So that's the challenge. But I do think it makes things easier if you have a global perspective and a global view and a global way of working.
Fantastic. So this next question, we're gonna zoom out a little bit. So we've all talked about COVID-19, the impact it's had on all of our lives amongst everything else that's happened in 2020. So what are some tactics that your marketing teams have leveraged in 2020 to engage customers that worked well that you might not have tried out if COVID-19 hadn't happened? What were some of those forced tactics? Ron, I'll start with you.
So we have a good one coming up right now, and it, obviously it starts from a bad place in that Halloween may be very, very different for children in 2020 than it has been before, right? So I think, and even though I'll say this is global, right? You have now trick-or-treating was happening all across parts of Europe last year. When I was living in Amsterdam, there was trick-or-treating going on in certain places, right? So it's a great, fun, fantastic holiday that was created here, and it's being transported in other places. Now, how does that live and work in a COVID world? So maybe we can take some of this virtually. How can we share candy and share fun and share treats in a virtual way, but really bring it and deliver it and fulfill it locally with some of our key retail partners, or our direct-to-consumer initiatives that we're starting to launch and build. And this is an opportunity for us to think differently, and maybe consumers are receptive to a different way of doing this to make this holiday fun for their children. So I think, and still safe and family friendly, right? So that's the opportunity. So we have several initiatives going on right now about this. So it's a real live example of if life is giving us lemons, let's make lemonade.
Yeah. I love that. Crystal, what are you seeing with your clients, or even at the trade desk, right? As a B2B marketer, what are you seeing in terms of new tactics that you've adapted?
Yeah, it's true. It's a different time, and I agree. We have to take the lemons and make lemonade. So at the trade desk, actually, just last week, we hosted a virtual festival for the marketing community. That is definitely something we never would have done without being in this state where we were stuck at home. But at a certain point, we shifted over from shucks, all my stuff is canceled, to like, how am I going to do this, despite, all of these challenges. So we conceived of a festival. We thought it was really important to engage our community in a fun way. Everybody, if you're working hard. If you're out of work, you're stressed. We've all been home way too long, and we're kind of losing our minds. But we really wanted to use the platform as an opportunity to inspire people and get them re-engaged and pumped up, to help do whatever they can as marketers to bring their brands back to growth. So we, gathered people, from around the industry that had incredible success stories. Like Angela Zepeda, the CMO of Hyundai, and Linda Yaccarino from NBCU, and numerous other leaders to share with us how much is going well and how many people are figuring it out, and help make people believe, that they can do it too, share their stories. And as we've been talking about, we made it super short because we're all getting fatigued in all things, 45 minutes or less. So that was really helpful, and I hope it made it possible for more people, to plug in than would have usually, for a little bite-sized bit of joy and inspiration. And we started to really optimize by trying to make things have more of an in-person feel. Because, like we're all doing the webinars, we're making it work, but there's something missing, from the way we used to get together. So we did some really fun, like online to offline activations across the globe where, our Germany team did these taco knocks where they sent, VIPs, these taco making kits, and they got together and, built tacos together. And here in North America, we hosted a, private, concert for festival goers with Lupe Fiasco, who performed, live from his garage. And it was amazing. Like, you wouldn't think that you could do all these things and make it feel so fun, but we're still able to do it. And, the longer this goes on, the better we get at it. So I think we're all going to be okay. And we're going to continue to innovate in how we can reach our customers and get them excited, about the work we do together.
Wonderful. Yeah, I think we're all adapting and coming up with new ideas and new concepts in real time these days. So that's fantastic. Next question here is for Ron. So Ron, what are your thoughts on branded content? Completely understand the necessity for garnering attention via shorter form video of your creative, but do you still see value in branded content partnerships with publishers and networks who can create compelling content via their own voice, using their talent and using formats that are appealing to their customer base?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that certain brands have the right to have direct to own content and have it be, I guess, the key thing for me is it has to be interesting and enticing to the consumer, right? I think most brands sit in a space where we are at least asking for permission to interrupt content, right? And that's with good advertising that's contextually relevant, right? So we advertising, we're finding this more and more often as consumers are in control. They can choose to view or not view advertising, and we have to continuously remind ourselves that advertising needs to be additive and not intrusive or violating what they're trying to do, which is consume content. And I think in the past we've lost sight of that. The branded content obviously only works if you have a compelling story to tell that's highly interesting. Not all brands have that, and I think it only works with that perfect fit of entertainment and added value between the brand, the consumer, and the content or the story, right? So the reality is it's always a big ask, and I think it takes a lot of work, and you have to sometimes be willing to throw stuff on the floor and throw it away, and that's true of any true publisher knows this, right? Brands are not used to that, and that's part of the problem, right? So being able to really be ruthless and critical of how good the quality is, that's the thing. And I think branded content works, but it has to be a home run, right? And you can't have mediocre content. I think what you're finding is there's a lot of mediocre content out there, or worse. So yes, I do think it's fantastic, and if you hit it out of the park, it's magnificent, right? But it's hard to do.
Absolutely. Well, so let's talk about marketing strategy for 2021. So how are you thinking about marketing strategy for 2021 when it's still unknown how long the stay-at-home trend will continue?
Yeah. So you want me to take this one, Crystal, and you can kind of
go for it.
Yeah, I think what you're seeing, over the past 6 months, what has played out for many brands, for many marketers, is a constant spinning and respinning of strategy as we've come through this kind of multi-step journey of understanding what we're facing. I think we now have a good sense of what we're facing and the uncertainty that sits in front of us. The reality is that there's no short-term answer. There's no immediate knowledge of when this ends. And I think there's some good forecasts and good estimates. Some of this is being politically spun literally as we speak. So the truth is, most companies now have a good strategic view on this, but what it leads you to is two paths, which is the path of what we think is going to happen and a backup plan for when it breaks, right? Because it may break at any point in time. And so what you're seeing is this ring fence of a backup plan. And we all have to have what that range is between the two. And that's what we're doing, is we're literally creating two media plans for next year. and a high and a low, and the ability to built into that to flex at any point in time to the low or the high, depending on indicators. And I think, most of us are going to try, I think most people are aiming for the high, because things that over the past few months have probably exceeded our expectations in terms of our ability to get to some form of normalcy, right? And I think I think most people are feeling the numbers as a whole are not maybe where we want them to be, but for some reason we're all kind of getting to a place where we're surviving and we're moving forward, right? And I think there's a lot of it's in all the negativity and all the tough stuff we've had to all deal with. I think we're finding that we're getting along on this better than we would have thought maybe back in April. And there's a lot of positivity, I think, in the financial forecasts and the business planning, at least from where I see and where we're sitting. So there's a lot of optimism to go on the high end of where the plans are, but there's a ring fence going on and a backup plan that's sitting behind it in a way that we've never really done before. And there is always the ability to pull levers and cut budgets and reset. But I think what we're coming up with is a real formal plan and key trigger dates on how to move this down. And I think that's exactly. And so what you're starting the year off is literally with 2 numbers in a way that we have not really done before, and an action plan on how to pivot between the two.
Yeah, I agree completely with Ron. In a normal year, you have just plan A. And if plan A doesn't happen, it's like apocalyptic. You don't, well, how did it not happen? I was counting on that. 2021, we all have plans A, B's, and C's. And we're all just planning for optionality. There's no other way to do it. None of us, want to lie down dead, as marketers and plan for a bad year and come in with like tiny little budgets. And, that's not the way to go. We shoot high, just as Ron said, but we have to be prepared, for anything. And that's the big lesson from 2020. I hope we never forget it, because, working this way keeps us more nimble, keeps us more connected to our customer. And honestly, this is the way we should always be, in these kinds of jobs.
Yeah, absolutely. Planning for flexibility, I think, is key for now and moving forward. So last question here. Whoa, where is Crystal's blouse from?
What'd you say, Stephanie?
I was like, the last question is, whoa, where is your blouse from? Inquiring minds.
My blouse?
Mine? Mine you're talking about?
Wow. It's Tahari. Thanks for noticing.
It's very nice.
I know that question wasn't for me, so
yeah. I'm surprised nobody asked about why my kids are jumping around, behind me. Like, what I really need for 2021 is my kids to go back to school out of my house.
Unfortunately, we're normal. That's the new normal, right? It's like the craziness behind you is the normal.
All about the headset.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. Ron, Crystal, thank you again for sharing your invaluable expertise. If one thing is clear, we are in an exciting time where more is possible than ever before. As always, to our audience, we hope you guys learned a tip or two throughout the conversation, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, everyone. Take care.